Fantastic.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Henrico County Manager John Vitolkis, and on behalf of the Board of Supervisors, I want to thank each of you for joining us here today. And before we begin, I'd like to welcome a few of our guests from the House of Representatives, the Honorable Abigail Spanberger from the 7th Congressional District, the Honorable Donald McEachin from the 4th Congressional District. We see our Senator Tim Kaine walking up, and obviously U.S. Secretary of Transportation, the Honorable Pete Buttigieg. And from the Board of Supervisors, we have 3 elected officials, our Chairman Dan Schmidt. We have Tyrone Nelson from the Verona Magisterial District and Mr. Frank Thornton from the Fairfield Magisterial District. Now, before yielding the microphone to our first speaker, I want to note that exciting developments and investments are happening all around us. From River Mill, the development that you see in the background, and Virginia Center Commons to Green City, which will be a model for environmental sustainability and the largest development in our county's history, and in fact the largest eco-district east of the Mississippi. In each area, our county is playing a vital supporting role by investing in new roads and public infrastructure. As a county, we've seen time and time again that smart investments in public facilities and infrastructure have a direct and positive impact on our community's economic vitality and our quality of life. Beautiful, well-maintained schools, parks, libraries, roads, trails, and transit services give our county a strong foundation. They also serve as a catalyst for private investment and growth. We certainly welcome all of the attention that infrastructure is getting in Washington, and now I'd like to invite our chairman, Mr. Dan Schmidt, to the podium. Mr. Schmidt.
Thank you, and good afternoon, everybody. Thank you, Mr. Vitolkis. Folks, here in Henrico County, not only are we blessed, as you just witnessed, to have an outstanding county manager, but we also place an immense amount of value and trust in our state and our federal colleagues, and we truly appreciate the close partnerships that Senator Kaine, Representative Spanberger, and McEachin continue to display for our residents and community. Thank you, Secretary Buttigieg, for taking the time to be here with us today, sir. We're always happy to share the exciting work that is being done here to build a stronger and more vibrant Henrico County. You know, we've chosen this location here today along this extension of Woodman Road for today's event to underscore how smart investments in roads and other public infrastructure can be a catalyst for positive change, as you just heard the manager explain. Henrico County has spent $4 million to extend this road and create a roundabout at its key intersection just south of us at Greenwood Road. We're also helping to spur private investment in a nearby River Mill community and beyond. This Woodman Road extension, however, is just a start. Next year, we'll begin construction on a new road right behind us called Lambert Way, which will lead visitors into Glover Park, an incredible recreational amenity here in the county, and then we'll connect it all with the new Fall Line Trail. Again, for those of you familiar with this trail, it'll span 43 miles from Ashland to Petersburg and be a major attraction for cyclists and other recreational users throughout Central Virginia. Thank you, Congressman McEachin, for your support of federal raised grant funding for this very important project, sir. Thank you. And to our north, at the end of this extension, we are in the midst of building an indoor sports and event center on the site of the Virginia Center Commons Mall. This facility, plus the intentional planned expansion of transit services up the Brook Road corridor, the Route 1 corridor, will help transform that area and this area into a destination for sports tourism, attracting hotels, new housing, restaurants, and more. This is yet another example of how strategic investment in public infrastructure is being leveraged to attract private investment and opportunities. And to our south, we will soon see Green City begin to take shape. Green City is designed, as you know, as an eco-district and will be a model for environmental sustainability and civic engagement with development standards for net zero energy and water. Green City also promises to be the largest development in Henrico's history, with extensive parks, trails, open spaces, among 2 million square feet of office space, 280,000 square feet of retail space, 2,400 housing units, 2 hotels, and a $250 million 17,000-seat arena. A development of Green City's magnitude will need an equally strong road network. That's why we're planning to extend the Magellan Parkway over Interstate 95 to provide additional access to this site. Thank you, Congresswoman Spanberger, for your support for federal raised grant funding to support this project. Thank you, ma'am. In your support of this project, it highlights how key infrastructural improvements, when implemented in support of leading-edge sustainability projects, are a model of prudent, sensible, and environmentally conscious growth. As government officials, folks, whether it's here on the local level, our state level, or the federal level, we collectively have a responsibility, a duty, in fact, to make our communities stronger and make them places where businesses and families can prosper. In Henrico County, we not only accept that challenge, but we are propelled by the belief that a community is only as strong as its schools, its roads, its public safety, and other facilities and infrastructure. I'd now like to turn the podium over to Senator Kane to say a few words. Thank you all. Senator?
Good afternoon, Henrico. Isn't it a gorgeous day? What a gorgeous day to be together with friends, great local and federal officials, neighbors. I'm a Northside Richmonder and know many of you, and I want to welcome Secretary Buttigieg. What a treat it is to have you. Any mayor, anybody who's been mayor is fine by me. It's such a tough job. As those of you on the Board of Supervisors here know, local government is tough. I woke up this morning and my 2 events today were speaking at a governor's transportation forum in Northern Virginia with Senator Warner to the state's transportation officials, and then meeting our Secretary of Transportation here and talking about the infrastructure bill. And I sort of did my Rorschach, what am I going to say? And you know, the first thing that comes to your mind, sometimes that's not what you should say. But the first thing that came to my mind as I walked out this morning was George Harrison. It's been a long, long, lonely winter. It seems like years since it's been clear. Here comes the sun. Here comes the sun. We are a nation that has been through such a challenge since March of 2020. I mean, I know you can all visualize the faces of people. You might know people who've died. You might know people who have been sick. You might know people who've lost jobs or whose businesses have struggled. You might have had a grandchild that you couldn't go visit, or a wedding you couldn't attend, or a funeral that was never held. It's been a long, long, lonely winter. But Americans are upbeat and optimistic people, and we're not going to stay on our back foot. We're going to persevere, and in tough times, go farther and go further. Earlier this year in March, we passed the American Rescue Plan by 1 vote in the United States Senate, and that rescue plan helped us build a ladder out of the health and economic crisis of the pandemic. Henrico County, City of Richmond, our communities around Virginia, the state received $7.5 billion to try to help solve pandemic needs and grow the economy, and additional monies for schools and for our universities. That was step 1. The infrastructure bill, biggest investment since the Eisenhower administration. Road, rail, bridges, airports, ports, broadband, power grid, clean energy. That's a way to shake out of some doldrums. You know, not just sit back and think about what's lost, but let's go ahead, let's march ahead, let's grow, let's build, let's come together to raise the platform for everyone's economic success. And now I'm excited to be working very hard on the third piece, Build Back Better, which I call the workforce and education bill. Working very hard on that. And why? Why work on that one? Who's going to build the infrastructure? If we make the biggest investment in infrastructure since the Eisenhower administration, the unemployment rate's 4.2%. People are having a hard time hiring folks. Who's going to build it? We have got to train and grow an American workforce that can make these investments and that can outcompete the rest of the world for decades. And that's what Build Back Better is about. It's the education and workforce piece that will enable us to outcompete the world and get these projects done. So it has been a long, lonely winter. And it's not like we're through all the crises, not by a long shot. But I can see smiles returning to faces, and I can see the sun coming up. Hey, folks, this is December 3rd here. Look at this. It's 68 degrees. And I feel really good to be part of a team that's making that happen together with you. I want to introduce a great teammate who's been a friend of mine for now 35 years, long before either of us ever thought we would be in politics. And that is your congressman in the 4th Congressional District in Richmond, my good friend Donald McEachin.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Quiet as it's kept, I'm home.
Yeah.
This is the original Glen Allen. What that thing out west is, I don't know. Mr. Vitokis, I don't know how that came to take the name of Glen Allen, but this is Glen Allen. This is where I grew up. And it's so good to be back home. It's good to be with Senator Kaine and Congresswoman Spanberger and our latest best friend, Secretary Buttigieg. And, of course, I have to salute the Henrico County Board of Supervisors. By the way, Mr. Secretary, in case things get confusing to you, Virginia is one of those odd states where the cities and the counties are separate entities. And so I can say that I live in the finest city in Virginia, but this is the finest county in Virginia, with the finest Board of Supervisors and by far the finest county manager. So it is good to be home. I miss you guys. If Abigail slips up and lets the Supreme Court draw you in to the 4th, I'm coming home. Might have to talk to the Commonwealth Attorney for Richmond about that, but I'm coming home. But as Tim said, we've done a lot of work in Washington. But none of it's more important than the work we're doing on infrastructure, because we are literally reinventing the economy. And this is an exciting time to be alive. I can only imagine what it was like going from the transition between agriculture to industrial to the so-called information age, and now we're going to green our economy. Tim was talking about the things we have to build, and among those things that we're going to have to build are electrical charging stations. And I'm so excited about that, because in those bills that we have passed, we're going to put together 500,000 electrical charging stations. I'm sorry, not 500,000, 550,000 electrical charging stations. I was just talking to someone from GM, and they were telling me that they have stopped, for all practical purposes, making gas-fired automobiles. They are all going to be electrified now. And so we've got a lot of challenges ahead about how we make that happen. How do we make that work? How do we get people to be patient? Because when you pull up to charge up your car, it's not like, 5 minutes, right? It's going to be maybe a half hour, the way these charging stations work. So we have those types of challenges in front of us. But the notion of reinventing our economy so that we have a clean world to pass on to our children, and my grandchild is coming on March 3rd, is something that's very exciting to me. But I have the privilege right now of introducing to you a woman who has literally taken Washington by storm. I made a plea not too long ago that I had just gotten into the United States Congress and I needed a new neighbor. And the people of the 7th Congressional District complied with my request. And so I'm happy to introduce you to my not so new neighbor anymore, but my dear and precious friend, Abigail Spanberger.
Well, so Congressman McEachin and I often refer to each other as neighbors because we represent communities together. I represent half of Henrico. He represents half of Henrico. I represent half of Chesterfield. He represents half of Chesterfield. and then he has the city of Richmond. And so the Central Virginia community, the greater Richmond area, is a community that we work to serve together. And that's what today is about. It's about highlighting the priorities that we have put forth and that we have worked on, and frankly, the votes we have taken in support of that effort to support these communities and the tremendous work that we see happening here in Central Virginia. So to that end, I want to begin by thanking our hosts. Supervisor Thornton, Supervisor Nelson, Chairman Schmidt, and County Manager Vitulkas. Thank you for the incredible work that you all are doing for Henrico with your other board members. Donald McEachin, thank you for being here. Senator Kaine, thank you for being here. And Secretary Buttigieg, thank you for being here to witness what we have happening here in Central Virginia, where we are recognizing the value of movement and transportation as an issue of connectivity. Henrico County really continues to be a model for how we can deliver for our communities in a responsible, forward-looking, people-focused way. So I want to thank everyone here from the county who has worked tirelessly here in the community for citizens. Thank you for highlighting how Virginia really can lead the way and make physical infrastructure investments in the years ahead. Right before us, we see an example of how the works to further connect our region and spur economic development across Central Virginia can come into being. We see the extension of the Woodman Road will connect our communities, but it does more than that. It creates bicycle space. It creates places for people to transit. It creates reasons to build neighborhoods and grow our community. And as you heard, Lambert Way will be going in just down there. It creates an opportunity to honor those in our community who we've lost, who's Officer Lambert. And so I'm so excited that this community not only is honoring important community members who have passed on, but are doing so recognizing the value of connection and in movement. I grew up in this county, and I'm so proud to represent Henrico County in Congress. And last month, I was honored to be at the White House as President Biden signed into law the Bipartisan Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act. This bill was a long time coming. It began with ongoing negotiations between the Senate and the House and the White House, conversations about what was necessary, conversations about what our communities needed. And I was proud to be a very vocal supporter of this bill and to work to push it across the finish line because I know what Virginia would benefit. I knew that Virginia would benefit in terms of ultimately an estimated $7 billion in investments in our highways and our roads, cutting traffic and decreasing commute times. More than $530 million for Virginia's bridge replacements, keeping our families and our communities safe and connected. More than $1.2 billion for public transportation projects in Virginia, including support for ongoing Amtrak expansion programs. More than $100 million in estimated funds to support an expanded Virginia electric vehicle charging network, as Congressman McEachin spoke about. That creates jobs right here in Central Virginia. The truth of the matter is that our roads, our bridges, our internet infrastructure, our rails, and our bike paths literally bring people together. They connect us. They remind us of our common future, which, as Senator Kaine mentioned, is on its path towards being brighter. The Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act represents making this constructive progress together through a heck of a lot of construction. This legislation also directly addresses many of the challenges that face people here in Virginia and across the country. It takes efforts and work to address the ongoing issues in our supply chain, and this law takes real steps forward. I have heard, as so many of my colleagues have, about the challenges facing our trucking industry and the shortages amid increased demand. And this law invests in expanding our workforce while also cutting burdensome regulations that have caused delays and disruption. I was proud that this bill ultimately included a piece of legislation that I had worked on and led alongside a Florida Republican to modernize regulations on livestock haulers. And I'm hopeful that this amendment will help reduce congestion and delays in our livestock industry. that all that connects us to a few critical points, the Bipartisan Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, it represents jobs. It represents keeping Virginia competitive, and it's going to make sure that we stay the #1 state for business in the entire country. Mr. Secretary, we have had that title now 2 years in a row, and we plan to keep it. And with this monumental legislation, I know that our next generation will be stronger. I know that thousands of Virginians will benefit from good-paying, family-sustaining jobs. And I know that communities like Henrico County and all of the counties across Virginia's 7th District, Virginia's 4th District, and the larger Commonwealth will be ready to put these investments to work. Here in Virginia, we are keeping our foot on the gas or on that pedal in your electric vehicle. And here in Virginia, we're looking forward. Virginia is leading the way. And I am so grateful to have the opportunity to introduce Secretary Buttigieg to you and to introduce Henrico County to Secretary Buttigieg. I'm so appreciative of his focus on the transformational power that is transportation investments and infrastructure investments. I'm so proud that we are here welcoming him today, and now it is my honor to invite America's 19th Secretary of Transportation, Secretary Pete Buttigieg, to share his comments.
Here, here. Well, thank you so much, Representative Spanberger. Thank you for your leadership, your service to this country in more ways than one, and for encouraging me to come here. Now, I very much understand why. Representative McEachin, likewise, thank you for being here. Thank you for accommodating on rather short notice a very meaningful visit to Richmond earlier today. I want to thank Senator Kaine, somebody I have admired for a long time and who has done so much to bring us to this point, and I'll talk a little bit more in a moment about what that means. And as was said rightly, so much depends on local leadership. John, I agree that it's nice to finally see infrastructure getting the kind of attention and discussion that it deserves, this ordinarily unglamorous topic. And to Chairman Schmidt and all of the Henrico County leaders and all of the local leaders here, your pride and enthusiasm for this community is contagious. And I can feel it. And I can also feel the principle that I learned very early on as mayor, which is if you make the right kinds of public investments, private investments will follow. And it's a handshake between public and private that really makes things work in our country and in our communities. So I'm so thankful to the state, local, and federal leadership that has allowed us to do the work that you see around you and so much more where that came from, thanks to the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law. It was an amazing moment when the president signed that infrastructure bill into law, something that so many presidents and so many Congresses had talked about and hoped to achieve, seeing it finally get done on a bipartisan basis. And it couldn't have come at a more urgent time. You know, the American Society of Civil Engineers comes out with those notorious report cards every now and then, right now giving us a C- on infrastructure in this, the greatest country in the world. 1 in 5 miles of roads, 45,000 bridges are in need of repair in this country. Nearly 30 million Americans don't have broadband access at a time when being connected to the internet is just as important as being connected to the interstate highway system. And we have felt these shortcomings every day in our daily lives, the detours, the potholes, the inaccessibility of internet access, and in much graver ways than what can be accounted for financially. Over 35,000 people killed in traffic crashes every year. And that's why I particularly was encouraged to hear the focus on safety. That is so important to the leaders here. We have resources now to create a safer and cleaner and better transportation system for everybody because of the historic investments in roads and bridges, in public transit, investments in road safety. And crucially, at a time like this, modernization of our ports, our airports, and our rail, which will help us not only to move people where they need to be, but to get goods where they need to go, which brings me to wanting to spend just a moment to talk about our supply chains. Decades of underinvestment, plus unprecedented demand, plus the pandemic that we're facing right now have all conspired to create a perfect storm of pressure on our goods movement systems in this country. Now, the supply chain is composed of private sector entities, and rightly so. Nobody wants a federal government-owned and operated grocery store or shipping company or warehouse system, but those private systems run on public infrastructure. That's why we have a responsibility to make sure that we're doing our part to help. And we're working in the meantime, while we're
as I like to say, building cathedrals for the long run with the future of our ports and airports and systems. Acting in the near term with things like the Port Action Plan. A lot of creative activity like helping fund or unlock the funds for inland pop-up container yards. The thought here being that if the containers are piling up on that precious real estate of the port, push them inland and sort them out there and get them onto the rail cars or the trucks that they need to be on. Guiding the ports of LA and Long Beach to 24/7 operations, working with major companies to commit to moving more cargo during off-peak hours. And soon we'll be announcing a new round of Port Infrastructure Development Program grants while also opening applications to the next one, which will be a much larger pot of money thanks to that bipartisan infrastructure law that the representatives and senator you see here helped us to pass, and that the local leaders here helped us to advocate for. Meanwhile, with regard to trucking, we're working to cut red tape and make it easier for new truckers to get licenses. We're coordinating with industry and labor to reduce turnover in the sector. And we've been convening discussions like one we're about to have later this afternoon to address problems in real time and find solutions. But most importantly, we need profound investment and deep change, and that brings me back to this bill. When we have the largest investments ever in categories from public transit to our ports, that's what's going to make it possible for us to actually, as the president so often says, say that this was the time when we decided as a country to win the 21st century. There's so much that this law is going to do to benefit Virginia, to benefit America, and we're proud to be part of it. So I want to thank again the leaders who have come here today. The only thing I love more than seeing dirt moving is seeing a ribbon cutting for the finished product. So I'm going to eagerly look forward to seeing the progress that's made right here where we are. And with that, I think we have a little bit of time for questions to be quarterbacked by my colleague Carrie, who's right over here. Well, transportation is about connection, or at least it's supposed to be. What we see right here, right, is an opportunity that is going to connect vehicles and bicycles alike to where they need to be. What you see in Jackson Ward is how transportation dollars sometimes serve to disconnect. And we have a chance to do something about that. It's what the Reconnecting Communities program is all about. So that when you look down a road like we did and you see where it just is cut through by an interstate, that we have a chance, and it's going to be different in different communities, whether you go over it or under it or around it, whether it's through transit, replacement, removal, or something else. But the point is, transportation should always be about connecting, never about dividing. And today was a great example of a proud community with a rich heritage that deserves our support.
My question was the same. It was how you didn't actually see where the interstate crossed through the community at the bridge at First Street, but you had a sense of it. Did you get a real feeling for what happened?
Yeah, I mean, again, I think the important thing is to see the areas that rely on transportation and that are impacted when it doesn't connect the way that it should, right? Because when you're on an interstate, when you're on the interstate that brought us down here earlier today from Washington, D.C., what you don't see is the communities that you're passing through. But enlightened 21st century transportation planning and design has to be about integrating any new transportation asset with the surrounding community. That's what the future of Jackson Ward could be. That's what we see right here, where you see this very thoughtful public-private vision that says, okay, you look at where we got to connect to. You look at the surrounding area, you look at the opportunity that is envisioned for the future. How do we knit it together in a way that benefits everybody instead of imposing benefits in a way that benefits for some in a way that undercuts the prosperity of others?
But you see this, is this pot of money going to be big enough, do you think, to address the potential solutions in Jackson Ward and other communities, New Orleans, Syracuse, where you have similar issues?
I would characterize it as a beginning. And much will depend on our ability and community's ability to use these dollars well. Same as the RAISE grants or any other competitive program or any other formula program too, for that matter. Ultimately, what we've got to do is demonstrate the effectiveness of these strategies, and then more will beget more.
Any other questions from the media about infrastructure? Yes, hi, Buttigieg with the News. You talk about this long list of to-do right on this infrastructure bill here. I'm sure the timeline varies
Yeah, so what I would say is some of this is dollars that are already going out there from resources that we have, but those pots are about to get bigger, right? So the RAISE grants, for example, things that we're funding right now in Virginia that we're proud of, but we could be doing so much more. There are formula dollars that the state is going to use that already go into road projects that will have immediate effect as those funding sources grow. In other cases, we're talking about entirely new programs, reconnecting communities. There's never been anything like that. The Safe Streets for All, which is going to help with those safety objectives that the supervisors talked about. That we've never had something like that, so we have to design it. And we're very mindful of needing to balance the importance of getting dollars out quickly with the fact that we've got to get it right, because we'll never get another chance like this, probably as long as we live, a historic investment of these proportions. And so we have a responsibility to make sure that we get it right. So safe to say that in the very near term, I mean, some of these port grants I was talking about, we're going to roll out the last round very soon and then open up the next round soon after, all the way through to things that are like cathedrals, a new airport terminal, a whole different vision for a transit center. That'll take time. That's okay. This isn't a 2009 style short-term stimulus bill. This is about making sure that the 2020s, plural, as a decade, go down in history as the time when America turned and faced the future.
Any other questions? Yes. I'm Secretary Nancy Shepard from WY Daily. First, I'd like to invite you down to our part of the world in Williamsburg.
I'd love it.
We have a community that's reliant on small business, hospitality, tourism. We also have a large port down there in Norfolk. The challenge we're seeing with our small businesses is they're having to close. Part of it is because of the supply chain issue. They can't get the product they need. How quickly do you see this helping to remedy problems for settlers?
Yeah, these supply chain issues and particularly their impact on small businesses. Actually, Representative Spanberger was bending my ear about this not long ago on the phone, and I know that's impacting communities everywhere. It's one of the reasons why we feel such a sense of urgency with the short-term steps that we're taking. We're going to invest $17 billion in America's ports, but that's not something that gets you through Christmas season, right? And that's why efforts like the Ports Task Force helping to have sweeper ships picking up empties so there's more room for containers coming through. Engaging the CEOs of the largest companies, the Walmarts, the Targets, not only to make sure that they're getting their inventory on their shelves, but to make sure that they're moving their cargo through for the benefit of others who need access to those same shared freight resources but don't have giant multinational contracts and the market power that comes with them. I'm very concerned about the impact on small businesses in particular, and it's with regard to supporting them in particular that we're taking this perspective that it can't wait. And I think our roundtable later today will probably surface some other ideas coming from the business community, and I'm looking forward to hearing those and taking those back to D.C.
Thank you so much. We have time for just one more.
Virginia Mercury. I wanted to ask, some community members around Jackson Morning Gilpin are concerned that the new infrastructure investments could end up in their ultimate displacement. Could you tell me more about what type of programs or money might be involved to help ensure that investment also reinforces the existing communities and doesn't just lead to further displacement?
Yeah, one of the most important things is engagement from day one, right? These steps have to be done by and with neighbors, not to them. And what I saw was, I think, a real commitment on the ground to making sure that happens, but we've got to match that commitment at the federal level. That kind of participation was not present in early rounds of federal investment in our infrastructure, which is part of why, though it created extraordinary opportunity, it also created a number of problems. But if we get this right, it will create value for those communities and those families and those small businesses that have been there all along, while opening new opportunities for more. And I have seen it where it doesn't happen automatically, but I have seen how the right kind of engagement and participation from day one makes sure that those who have been there the whole time benefit. Let me also just point to the labor and business side of this. So one of the reasons why we're driving concepts like local hire, as much as the statute will allow us to, is to make sure that we get away from these patterns where you got the residents in a community, typically a community of color, looking around their neighborhood, seeing construction work done there, but none of the workers look like they came from the neighborhood. And there are steps we can take to encourage that kind of local hire, as well as local small business development, given that we are talking about literally hundreds of billions of dollars of business opportunity, not just infrastructure opportunity, represented through this bill. And, as the members of Congress and the Senator mentioned, this is fundamentally about jobs, this legislation. We're very mindful of making sure that those jobs reach everybody who could benefit from this.
Thanks, everybody.
All right. Thanks again.